At 0400 hours on a Tuesday morning, 5,012 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at
Paul,
the edge of the
state
solar
your purpose.
system.
I mean
The
no harm. I seek
gravitational
passage.
shockwave hit first.
Lower your hands. Move slowly.
17
as you wish.
satellites died before
Stay
the
down!
light from the event
Please,
reached
I mean
Earth's
no
night side.
harm.
Silence! Hands
Communication
where I can
networks
see them!
stuttered.
Don't shoot!
Weather monitoring went dark across
Anomaly
the Pacific
detected.
Rim.
Sector 4.
3
Confirmed.
deep space
Escalating fast.
telescopes
Rerouting power to
registered the
stabilizers.
distortion
Containment
and
holding.
immediately
Threat
recalibrated,
confirmed.
unable
Deploy
to
chain
process
countermeasures now.
what their sensors
All
were
known
showing
quantum
them.
action on all screens.
In the underground
Stay sharp,
operations
right
center
away.
beneath the Colorado Rockies, every screen went white with contact alerts. Admiral Dominic Hartwell was halfway through his second coffee when Lieutenant Nyla Frost grabbed his arm. Her fingers were cold. Her voice was level, but her breathing was too controlled, too measured. "Sir, you need to see this right now." Hartwell set the coffee down slowly. He had been waiting 20 years for someone to say those words. 20 years since the first contact war. That was what the history books would call it, though war was generous for what had actually happened. A Council probe ship had arrived in 2167, transmitted its demands for Earth's immediate submission, and when Earth responded with a polite refusal, the probe had detonated in low orbit. Station 7 died instantly. 400 souls, including Dr. Sarah Hartwell, who had been studying the probe's energy signature when it exploded. The Council sent a single message after "Compliance is not optional. We will return." 20 years, and now they had. Hartwell followed Frost to the command table. The holographic display above it showed the outer solar system, and where there should have been empty space, there was now a field of red contacts so thick they looked like a dust cloud. "Contact count," Hartwell said. 5,012 vessels, sir." Frost's hands moved across the interface. "Ranging from destroyer class to something so enormous, our sensors keep recalibrating." Hartwell stood perfectly still. He thought of his wife's last transmission. 3 words before the probe detonated, "It's beautiful, Dom." He reached for his wedding ring without thinking. The metal was warm from his skin, a habit 20 years old. 12 contacts breaking formation, Frost said, moving ahead of the main group, broadcasting on diplomatic frequencies. Of course they are. The diplomatic ships held position just inside lunar orbit. The message arrived 14 seconds later, translated in real time by the relay network Earth had spent 40 years building for exactly this kind of moment. "Attention inhabitants of the third planet of this star system. You have been evaluated by the Galactic Council of Sovereign Worlds and found to be an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Your species has demonstrated repeated disregard for Council directives, unauthorized territorial expansion, development of prohibited weapons technology, and failure to submit to mandatory registration. You have 1 planetary rotation to comply with the following terms: full military surrender, disarmament of all orbital platforms, transfer of all advanced research data to Council custody. Failure to comply will result in the application of corrective force." The recording ended. The operations center went quiet. Someone dropped a stylus. It clattered on the floor with a sound like a gunshot. Hartwell looked at the red cloud on the display. Then he looked at Frost. She was 31 years old. Her father had been on Station 7 when it died. They had never spoken about it directly, but he saw it in her eyes every time the anniversary came around. The same thing he saw in the mirror. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "how long has Earth been preparing for exactly this?" Frost almost smiled. "Officially, sir, 40 years. And unofficially, longer than that." Hartwell picked up his coffee again. It was still hot. "Get me General Harrow, full Joint Command Assembly, and get me Dr. Vaughn from Deep Research." "Already paging them, sir." "Good. And Lieutenant alert Senator Wren in Geneva. Tell him we're going to need a diplomat before this is over." "Sir." "Then let's show them what 40 years looks like." Dr. Alexis Vaughn arrived 17 minutes later, tablet in hand, dark circles under her eyes that spoke of 30 hours without sleep. She had been running final calibrations on the grid when the alert came through. She had not stopped working since. General James Harrow was already at the tactical table when Hartwell entered the deep command room. The real operations center, the one that existed 3 levels below the one the politicians knew about. "Fleet hasn't moved from holding position," Harrow said without looking up. "They're waiting for our response." "They've run this operation 47 times, Vaughn said. She looked up from her tablet. Her eyes were bloodshot but alert. "We intercepted Council records 6 years ago. 47 species, 47 ultimatums, 47 surrenders within 12 hours. None of them knew what was coming," Frost said. None of them had 40 years to prepare, Vaughn corrected. She tapped on her tablet and a new overlay appeared on the main display. The inner solar system lit up with a network so dense it looked organic. Orbital platforms, relay emitters, phased compression arrays embedded in asteroid rock, long-range installations disguised as mining operations, thousands of nodes, all dark, all waiting. Project Shield Wall, Harrow said quietly, fully operational. The Council has no record of its existence, Vaughn added. We made absolutely certain of that. Hartwell walked to the main console. For a moment, just a moment, he let himself feel it. The weight of 20 years, the grief that had sharpened into purpose, the understanding that everything they had built, everything they had prepared was about to be tested against 5,000 ships. He thought of Sarah, wondered what she would say if she could see this moment. Then he pushed the thought aside and opened the diplomatic frequency. This is Admiral Dominic Hartwell, United Earth Defense Command. We have received your terms. We reject them entirely. Earth does not surrender. Earth does not disarm. Before your fleet moves one more kilometer toward this planet, I strongly advise you to take a very careful look at what is standing between you and us. He closed the channel. 11 seconds of silence. Then the Council fleet began to move. Vaughn's hand found the edge of the tactical table, gripped it tight. Hartwell noticed. A small thing, but he had worked with her for 20 years. He knew when Alexis Vaughn was afraid. Shield wall coming online, she said. Her voice held steady. Around the solar system, thousands of nodes began to wake up. Fleet Commander Varathas had personally overseen the correction of 9 worlds. He had stood on the command deck of the carrier Infinite Resolve and watched species kneel. He had seen governments collapse. He had witnessed the moment when resistance became surrender. He had never seen what happened next. The first wave of Council destroyers, 400 vessels, arranged in standard approach wedge, crossed the outer boundary marker of Earth's designated orbital space. And then the tactical display went quiet. 40 red contacts vanished from the feed in the span of a single breath. Then 40 more. Then 40 more. No explosion, no debris field, no distress signals. Just absence. Varathas straightened in his command seat. His scales shifted from confident green to uncertain yellow. Report! His sensor officer's fingers moved fast across the console. Too fast. No incoming fire detected, Commander. No energy signatures consistent with any known weapon system. The contacts are simply gone. Things do not simply disappear, Varathas said. They do now, sir. The officer's voice cracked. Varathas had served with him for 16 years. He had never heard fear in that voice before. On the display, another wave of destroyers crossed the invisible line. 30 contacts, then 20, then 10. All of them vanishing with mathematical precision. There was intelligence behind this. Purpose. Something that understood exactly what it was doing. Pull the remaining ships back, Varathas ordered. Establish safe distance. But there were no remaining ships in the first wave. 400 vessels had approached. 400 vessels had ceased to exist. Timeline from first contact to total loss, 8 minutes and 43 seconds. Varathas' scales went flat gray. In the back of his mind, something whispered, a thought he had not allowed himself in 9 corrective actions. A question he had trained himself not to ask. What if this time is different? On Earth, Marcus Volt was laughing. He was the lead engineer on the shield wall emitter grid. 11 years building something the Council would not see coming because it operated on a principle their own weapons research had dismissed as impractical. Gravitational compression nodes deployed in overlapping fields. Silent. Invisible. A tightening of space around a target until the target simply stopped holding together. Grid Sector 1 holding firm, he said into his headset. No bleed, no drift. Nodes are auto-tracking. We are green across the full inner boundary. In the operations center, Hartwell watched another 30 Council ships enter the grid's outer range and vanish from sensors. Vaughn stood beside him. She was not looking at her tablet anymore, just watching the display like it was the answer to a prayer she had been saying for 20 years. Their eyes met for a moment. Something passed between them, understanding, shared relief. The kind of connection that came from building something impossible together and watching it work. Then the moment passed and they both looked back at the display. They're going to identify the rough boundary soon, Vaughn said. Let them, Hartwell replied. The lesson is bigger than the grid. Because the plan was not simply to destroy ships. The plan was to teach the Council something fundamental. Earth did not fight the way they expected. Earth had spent 40 years constructing a planet-scale trap in complete silence. Patience as a weapon, unity as strength. 40 years of preparation proving itself in minutes. Vorothos pulled his remaining forces back and stared at the tactical picture. 211 ships gone. He opened a channel to his chief analyst. Kerneth, analysis. Strategic analyst Kerneth ran the geometry of the losses. When he spoke, his voice carried something Vorothos had never heard from him before. Something like awe. The losses follow a spatial boundary consistent with a field effect system, passive in nature. The effect is consistent across every point of contact. How large is the field? Kerneth paused. It appears to encompass the entire inner system. Vorothos sat back in his seat. For the first time in his career, he understood that he was facing something the Council playbook had no answer for. And in the back of his mind, that whisper grew louder. What if we are wrong? Marcus Volt stopped laughing. He was watching the Council fleet reorganize at distance. They were done probing, shifting to a different strategy. They're pulling back into a wide formation, Frost reported. Siege envelope. They assume we need resupply from outside, Hartwell said. They don't know about the belt operations. He turned to Vaughn. Is the second layer ready? Vaughn touched her earpiece. Captain Darnell's team is standing by on the lunar surface. Captain Reese Darnell stood in a pressurized hangar on the moon's dark side. 40 pilots and 200 special operations personnel waited behind him. Behind them sat ships that looked like debris, irregular shapes, spinning gently, the kind of scatter you expected near a large rocky body. For 2 years they had rehearsed this, launching on low-energy trajectories, drifting, tumbling, moving at exactly the pace debris moved, getting close, then not being debris anymore. Their command ships are holding at 12,000 kilometers outside the grid. Frost's voice came through on the tactical channel. Fleet commander formation anchored around the main carrier group. Darnell looked at his team, 40 of the most capable pilots Earth had ever produced, 200 operators who had walked mock-up corridors until the distances were automatic. This would be run 848. Volt's grid is holding, Darnell said. His voice was calm. The Council fleet is confused. They think they have time to figure this out. He paused. They don't. He touched his comm. Admiral Hartwell, this is Darnell. Team is ready, waiting on your order. Hartwell's voice came back immediately. Captain, it's time. 40 ships floated out from the moon's shadow, spinning, tumbling, perfect camouflage. They drifted in long, lazy arcs directly toward the Council fleet command tier. Vorothos did not look at the debris. He was occupied arguing with logistics staff about supply projections for a siege that might last months. But Kerneth was looking at the debris. Kerneth noticed that the drift pattern moved with consistency that did not match natural behavior. Rock did not tumble with that kind of regularity. Rock did not hold relative spacing. Kerneth opened his mouth to speak. Reese Darnell's ship stopped being debris. 40 vessels went from dead drift to full combat burn in under 2 seconds. Darnell's ship drove straight at the Infinite Resolve using the carrier's hull as cover. A ship that large could not bring weapons to bear on a contact that close without damaging itself. Breach team go. 6 boarding charges fired simultaneously. Clean entries through the outer hull. Darnell's teams were through in under 30 seconds, moving into corridors lit by red emergency alerts. Point man Will Garrett took lead calling junctions. The team moved through the ship with precision born of 2 years of practice. They reached a sealed bulkhead. Garrett placed a breaching charge. 5 seconds to arm. 3 to detonation. The charge blew. Council security was waiting. The firefight lasted 14 seconds. Plasma against kinetics. Light and noise and the smell of superheated metal. When it ended, 3 Council security officers were down. Private Garrett was down 2 plasma bolt through his side. The medic was on him immediately. He'll make it, the medic said, but he's out. Darnell felt something twist in his chest. Garrett had 2 kids back on Earth, 7 and 9 years old. He had shown Darnell pictures before they deployed. Keep moving, Darnell said. His voice came out harder than he intended. They reached the communications core 3 minutes and 47 seconds after breaching. And someone was waiting for them. A tall figure stood in the center of the room. Gray skin, secondary eyes, hands held out, not reaching for anything. He spoke in the council language. The translation unit on Darnell's wrist caught up after a moment. I have been waiting, the translation read, for humans to do exactly this. Darnell had his weapon up. On your knees, hands behind your head. Now. The figure complied slowly. I am Strategic Analyst Kerneth. I am Fleet Commander Varathis' Chief Tactical Officer, and I have been carrying something for 3 years that my own commanders would end my career for possessing. What? A complete accounting of every species the Council has subjected to corrective force. The ones who surrendered and are still standing. The ones who surrendered and are no longer standing at all. Kerneth met Darnell's eyes. It is not a short list, and I think you should see it. Darnell kept his weapon steady. Secure him. Get that data drive in the system. And get me Admiral Hartwell right now. In the operations center, Hartwell watched boarding operation reports come in. 7 teams, 7 vessels breached, all successful. 3 casualties total, all survivable, including Private Garrett, now in medical on the lunar base. Stable, going to make it home to his kids. Sir, Frost said, Captain Darnell is requesting direct communication. He says it's urgent. Hartwell opened the channel. Darnell, report. Sir, we have the communications core. Command codes, fleet, frequencies, formation protocols. Darnell paused. There's something else. We found someone waiting, council officer, chief analyst. He's been planning to defect for 3 years. And he has files, everything the council has done for 400 years. Hartwell looked at Vaughn. She was already pulling up the data stream. How many total? Hartwell asked. Vaughn's hand stopped moving. 63 civilizations across 400 years. 11 eliminated entirely. 52 exist as client states. Technology suppressed, populations managed, expansion controlled. She stopped. When she spoke again, her voice was different. The council doesn't want partners, sir. It wants property. Hartwell absorbed this. Around him, the operations center continued its work. But in this moment, he understood the true scope of what Earth had prepared to resist. Not just an invasion, a system, an order that had been running for 400 years. And Earth had just proven it could survive what 63 others could not. Captain Darnell, Hartwell said, bring him in. We're going to have a conversation. Kerneth sat in the secure interrogation room 3 levels below the main operations center. His wrists were bound. 2 armed guards flanked the door. Captain Darnell stood against the wall. Admiral Hartwell and Dr. Vaughn sat across the table from him. The room was silent except for air circulation. Kerneth's secondary eyes tracked movement, but his primary eyes stayed locked on Hartwell. You have been planning in this for 3 years, Hartwell said. Yes. You advise Fleet Commander Varathis on strategy. You calculate optimal approaches. You run the numbers that determine which civilizations live and which ones die. I was that person, Kerneth said. I am no longer willing to be. Vaughn leaned forward. Why now? Why defect during this operation? Kerneth's scales shifted to a color pattern Hartwell did not recognize. Because I have run the numbers for 9 corrective actions. I have calculated the optimal vectors for ships to approach defenseless planets. I have projected casualty rates. I have done this 9 times, and I am finished. He paused. But I am not alone. There are others like me in the council hierarchy. We have been waiting for a species strong enough to survive. A species that prepare instead of surrendered. A species that said no. How many others? Hartwell asked. Kerneth's eyes held his. 47. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. Vaughn's tablet slipped slightly in her hands. Darnell straightened against the wall. Hartwell felt something shift in his chest, an understanding of just how deep this went. 47 council officers, Hartwell said slowly, in positions of authority waiting for someone to resist successfully. We are not revolutionaries. We are bureaucrats, analysts, officers who have spent our careers serving a system we no longer believe in. We cannot change it from within, but we can prepare. We can gather evidence. We can wait for the moment when that evidence might matter. Kerneth looked at Hartwell directly. You are that moment, Admiral. Earth is that moment. If you survive this, if you prove that corrective force can be resisted, the Council's authority fractures. The client states will see. The member species will question. In the 63 civilizations in your files, The ones who did not prepare, the ones who believed diplomacy would save them. Kurneth's voice carried something the translation unit struggled to render. Grief. I have watched this happen 9 times. I have watched hope become ash. I will not watch it happen again. Hartwell stood, walked to the wall. 20 years of preparation, 40 years of construction, 400 years of council oppression, and now sitting in this room, a single officer who had spent 3 years gathering the evidence to burn it all down. Show us, Hartwell said. Show us everything. The files took 4 hours to process. Vaughn's analysis team worked in shifts cross-referencing, data verifying authenticity. 63 civilizations. Some were familiar. Species mentioned in council communications. Others were unknown. Gaps in the historical record where something had existed and then stopped existing. 11 fell into that second category. Complete erasure. Not just military defeat. Total elimination. Every planet scoured. Every ship destroyed. The council called it threat neutralization. Kurneth called it genocide. Frost stood at Vaughn's shoulder watching data scroll past. How do you kill 11 entire civilizations and keep it quiet? You classify the records, you restrict access, you wait 3 generations until everyone who remembers is dead. Then you edit the databases. Vaughn's voice was flat, professional. Eventually, it's like they never existed at all. She pulled up entry 47. The file was smaller than the others, less detailed. This one is different, Vaughn said. The room went very still. That's not possible, Frost whispered. Vaughn was already pulling up detailed records. Colony ship, generation vessel, launched from Earth approximately 2,000 years ago. Pre-FTL, destination Epsilon Eridani system. They made it, established 3 colonies, developed independently for 1,200 years. She stopped. Her hands were shaking. Then the council found them. The record showed it all. First contact, evaluation, classification as human variant, request for registration, refusal, escalation. The council sent 50 ships. The Forgotten Worlds surrendered in 6 hours. The council imposed technology restrictions, dismantled their industrial base, regressed them to pre-industrial development, and maintained them there for 800 years. 2.3 billion human beings who had no idea Earth still existed. Vaughn stood abruptly, walked to the corner, pressed her palms against the wall. Hartwell saw her shoulders moving, breathing deep. Frost's eyes were wet. There are humans out there living under council control for 800 years. They think they're alone. Hartwell felt something cold settle in his chest, the absolute certainty of what needed to happen next. They will know we survived, he said. They will know we came, and they will know we won. He turned to Frost. Her father had died on Station 7. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. Now she was looking at him with something fierce in her eyes. Purpose. The same thing he saw in the mirror every morning. Lieutenant, he said gently, get me Senator Wren, get me every broadcasting facility we have, and get me a direct link to Kurneth's access codes for the council network. Sir, her voice was thick but steady, we're going to tell them, all of them, every client state, every member species, we're going to show them what the council has done right now. Vaughn turned from the wall. Her eyes were red. That will destabilize the entire council power structure. They earned it. 400 years of oppression, 11 genocides, 52 enslaved civilizations. He looked at the display showing the Forgotten Worlds and 63 families that deserve to know the truth. Get it ready, he said. We broadcast in 1 hour. But the council moved first. 43 minutes later, radar stations on Mars picked up new movement. Council supply vessels began moving, not toward Earth, away. Running. They're repositioning their logistics tier, Frost reported, trying to get out of range. Hartwell looked at the tactical display. Smart tactical thinking. Get the vulnerable assets clear. There was only one problem. How far outside the grid boundary do they think they are? Hartwell asked. Vaughn was already calculating. Approximately 3,000 kilometers. And how far outside are they actually? Vaughn smiled. It was not pleasant. 0 kilometers. Volt's team extended the outer emitter line 2 weeks ago. Hartwell opened a channel. Marcus Volt. Already watching them, sir. 15 supply vessels have crossed the actual boundary. waiting on your authorization. Captain Darnell, can you see the supply tier from your position? Affirmative, they're running hard. Hartwell looked at the display. 15 ships, fuel haulers, repair tenders. Without them, the main force had 60 hours of operational capacity remaining. Volt, Hartwell said, light them up. 15 Council supply ships crossed the extended boundary and ceased to exist. The remainder reverse thrust so hard that 3 vessels suffered structural damage. They burned everything, getting away from the invisible line they could not see. On the Infinite Resolve, Varathas watched his logistics backbone flee. The situation had fundamentally changed. No resupply, 60 hours of fuel remaining, could not breach the grid, could not withdraw without authorization that would not come. That whisper in his mind was louder now. No longer a whisper, a voice. We are wrong, we have always been wrong, and I have been part of it for too long. But he pushed it down, did what commanders did when the playbook failed. He launched everything, not in formation, not in coordinated waves, all of it. Every remaining ship, from every direction simultaneously. A saturation attack designed to overwhelm any defensive system by sheer volume. If enough ships hit the boundary at the same time from enough vectors, something had to get through. It was sound tactical thinking. In any conventional engagement, it would have worked. But Earth had identified this exact approach 3 years earlier. Marcus Volt watched the Council fleet form up and felt something close to pity. They're really going to do it, he said into his headset. Full saturation. Every vector. Grid status, Vaughn's voice, optimal. The beauty is that it gets more efficient under stress. The denser the incoming contact cluster, the more load transfers to surrounding nodes. The more vectors they use, the more evenly we distribute the work. He pulled up the load distribution model, elegant, almost perfect. They're about to spend 2,647 ships trying to break a system designed to handle this. How long? Hartwell asked. 90 seconds. The Council fleet struck the shield wall boundary in a pulse that registered on seismic sensors across Earth, and for 90 seconds the sky filled with invisible death. Volt watched the contact count drop. 2,400, 1,800, 1,200, 600, numbers falling like stones. In the operations center, Hartwell stood at the tactical table. Vaughn beside him. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. Frost called out numbers. 2,000, 1,500, 1,000. The remaining reserve vessels, 1,200 ships that had not reached the boundary, stopped moving entirely. The Council fleet was no longer a force. It was a collection of ships waiting to die. When it was over, the operations center was silent. Someone was crying quietly. Someone else laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. 90 seconds, 2,647 ships. Hartwell's hand moved unconsciously toward his ring. He stopped himself, looked at Vaughn instead. She was already looking at him. Something passed between them. Not words, understanding. 20 years, we did it. Grid status, he said. All nodes green, Volt reported. No failures, system ready for another engagement if needed. It won't be needed, Vaughn said. She was looking at the 1,200 ships sitting motionless in the dark. Frost ran calculations. Remaining fleet has 60 hours operational capacity. After that, they're adrift. Hartwell walked to the main display, looked at the ships, looked at the empty spaces where others had been, thought about Kirneth and his 47 colleagues, thought about the forgotten worlds. 2.3 billion people who did not know help was coming, thought about what came next. Frost was staring at the display, at the numbers, at the proof that Earth had just done what 63 other civilizations could not. Dad, she whispered. So quiet, Hartwell almost missed it. We did it. We actually did it. Hartwell turned to her, saw tears on her face, saw 20 years of grief and purpose and determination all coming to the surface at once. He would be proud, Lieutenant, Hartwell said quietly. They all would. Frost nodded, wiped her eyes, straightened. What's next, sir? The shooting part is over, Hartwell has said. Now comes the hard part. What's the hard part? Making sure it stays over. Making sure this never happens again. To anyone. He turned to Frost. Is the broadcast ready? Yes, sir. Then send it, all of it. I want every being in Council space to see what their government has done. Frost hesitated. Sir, this will cause massive political instability. Good. Let them question. Let them demand answers. Let them see what 400 years of unopposed power does. He looked at Vaughn. She nodded. Send the broadcast, Hartwell said. And then get Fleet Commander Varathas on the line. In the corridors of the Infinite Resolve, Darnell stood with his team and listened to the broadcast begin. Hartwell's voice, calm, the voice of someone who had won. This transmission is being sent across the full Council network. What follows is a documented record of actions carried out under Council authority over the last 400 years. This is not a threat. This is a record. Then the files, all of them. 63 civilizations, 400 years. The eliminated ones, the enslaved ones, the forgotten worlds. Everything. Darnell watched Council crew members as they listened. Some stopped working, some started crying. One engineer sat down hard and put his face in his hands. We didn't know, the engineer said. We didn't know it was this many. You know now, Darnell said. And on the command deck of the Infinite Resolve fleet, Commander Varathas stood at the viewport and listened to his entire understanding of the universe break apart. He had overseen 9 corrective actions. 9 times he had watched resistance become surrender. 9 times he had believed he was maintaining galactic stability. 9 times he had been wrong. The whisper in his mind was no longer a whisper. It was a scream. What have I done? What have we all done? His scales shifted through colors he had not displayed since he was young. Before the military, before the council, before he learned to be certain. Gray, blue, something darker, the color of a soul realizing it had spent a lifetime serving something monstrous. Commander, his communications officer said quietly, Admiral Hartwell is requesting to speak with you. Varathas looked at his reflection in the viewport, saw a stranger looking back. Yes, he said, I believe we have some things to discuss. Admiral Dominic Hartwell stepped through the airlock of the Infinite Resolve and into the belly of the ship that had come to destroy his world. Captain Darnell waited at the airlock exit. Sir, we have control of 17 decks. Most of the crew has surrendered. Commander Varathas is waiting in the primary briefing chamber. Private Garrett. Stable, sir. Medical says he'll make a full recovery. Already asking when he can get back to his kids. Hartwell nodded, walked deeper into the ship, past Council crew members who pressed themselves against walls as he went by. Some looked at him with fear. Others with something that might have been relief. The briefing chamber was massive, built to hold hundreds. Now it held 6. Fleet Commander Varathas stood at the head of a long table, tall, broad across the shoulders. His scales shifted through colors as Hartwell entered. Gray to blue to something almost black. Lieutenant Frost stood to Hartwell's left, Darnell to his right. This moment belonged to the commanders. Varathas spoke first. You prepared for this, for 40 years. Yes. The behavioral modeling indicated your species too divided for coordinated response. Your governments oppose each other. Your resources are contested. Hartwell sat down at the table, across from Varathas, eye level. All of that is true, but when something from outside threatens what belongs to us, we reach an agreement fairly quickly. Varathas was silent for a long moment. My fleet has no operational capacity for resupply. I cannot breach your defensive grid. I cannot withdraw without authorization that will not come, because the Council does not acknowledge failure. If I request withdrawal, I admit failure. If I admit failure, every client state will know a resistance is possible. He looked at his hands. The Council will classify this engagement. They will restructure the record, and they will come again with more ships. Then the Council has a serious problem, Hartwell said. They see it as your problem, Admiral. Commander, I'm going to tell you what's about to happen, not because I want your permission, because I want you to understand what you're going to witness. He nodded to Frost. She activated the display showing the Council communication network. Thousands of nodes, millions of connections. 3 hours ago, one of your officers defected. Strategic analyst Kurneth. He brought files, complete documentation of every corrective action for 400 years. 63 civilizations. 11 eliminated, 52 enslaved. Varathas's scales went completely gray. We just broadcast those files to your entire network. Every member species, every client state. They're learning right now what their government has done. Varathas stood abruptly, walked to the viewport. You have destabilized the entire Council authority structure. Yes, you have started conflicts that will last generations. Or we've started conversations that should have happened centuries ago. Varathas looked out at the void where his fleet used to be. His voice came out different, smaller. I have overseen 9 corrective actions. 9 times I watched civilizations surrender. 9 times I believed I was maintaining stability. He turned to face Hartwell. His scales were colors Hartwell had not seen before. I listened to the broadcast, Admiral. I heard what Kirnath revealed. 47 others like him, waiting, preparing, and I realized something. He paused. I have been the instrument of oppression for my entire career. I calculated the approaches, I gave the orders, I enforced the system, and I believed I was serving stability when I was serving tyranny. The words came out with difficulty, like each one cost him something. You do not understand what you have done. The Council's power depends on unified movement. On absolute authority, you have shattered that. Member species will withdraw. Client states will rebel. Good, Hartwell said quietly. Let them question. Varathas was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. What are your terms? Those aren't my terms to give. Senator Elias Wren is coming from Earth. He'll negotiate specifics, but I can tell you the outline. Earth wants a binding non-aggression agreement, full sovereignty recognition, and immediate release of every client state. The Council is about to have bigger problems. Hartwell gestured to the display. It showed real-time communication traffic, ships breaking away, governments issuing statements. 4 of your member species just withdrew from the fleet formation, publicly, and 6 more are signaling intent. The carefully constructed unity was coming apart. This is happening whether you agree or not, Hartwell said. The only choice you have is whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. Varathas looked at the display. His scales shifted through colors. Finally, they settled on blue. I will speak with your senator, Varathas said, but I cannot speak for the Council. My authority ended when my fleet failed. Then speak for yourself, Hartwell said. That's all we're asking. Senator Elias Wren arrived 8 hours later, 57 years old, gray hair, steady demeanor. The kind of face that gave nothing away until he wanted it to. 35 years building agreements in impossible rooms. He had negotiated water rights between nations on the edge of war. He had brokered ceasefires everyone said would never hold. He was very good at his job. Hartwell met him at the airlock. Senator, thank you for coming. Admiral, I understand we're about to rewrite galactic political structure. Something like that. Good. I was getting bored with trade negotiations. The briefing chamber had been reconfigured. A communication array sat at one end. Linked to Earth, linked to the Council network, linked to everything. Varathas waited at the table. 2 Council senior representatives stood with him. Ambassador Thalen and Councillor Varix. Tall, dignified, dressed in ceremonial robes, they would negotiate. Try to salvage what they could. Wren sat down across from them. Hartwell stood behind him. Vaughn stood beside Hartwell, and for a moment their hands brushed. Just a moment, but Hartwell felt it. Warmth, connection, something that had been there for years but never acknowledged. Darnell and Frost flanked the door, and at the far end of the table sat Kirnath, the defector who had burned the Council's secrets. Ambassador Thalen spoke first. Senator Wren, we appreciate your willingness to negotiate. The Council recognizes that this engagement has resulted in unforeseen complications. We believe continued conflict serves neither party's interests. We propose the following framework. He outlined it carefully. Earth would stand down its defensive grid. The Council would withdraw. Earth's classification would be reassessed. Formal membership discussions under standard framework. Careful wording, making capitulation sound like compromise. Wren listened without interrupting. He had a tablet but never looked at it. He kept his eyes on the representatives, watching, reading what they did not say. When they finished, Wren folded his hands on the table. No, the representatives blinked. Senator, perhaps if we examine parameters. You sent 5,012 ships to this planet. You demanded our full surrender and the transfer of our research. You described the destruction of everything we have built as corrective force. You have done this to 63 other civilizations. 11 no longer exist. He paused. What you propose is that we trust the organization responsible for all of that. That is not a serious offer. Senator, the historical complexity is precisely the point, the complexity, 400 years of systematic oppression, 11 genocides, 52 enslaved civilizations, all documented, all now public. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a physical document, paper, printed text. He placed it on the table. These are the terms, not an opening position, not a framework, the terms. 5 points. 1 binding non-aggression certification verified by independent parties. 2 full recognition of Earth's sovereignty and unrestricted expansion rights. 3 immediate release of all 52 client states from dependency arrangements. 4 independent tribunal to review every corrective action in council history. Findings publicly available. 5 council restructuring to include representation from former client states. The council representatives stared at the document. The council cannot agree to a tribunal of that scope, Thalin said carefully. Kerneth spoke. His voice was quiet but carried across the chamber. The historical complexity is precisely the point. Every senior council official has known what was in those files. The question was never whether the record existed. The question was whether anyone would have sufficient standing to demand it be opened. He looked at both representatives. Someone does now. The briefing chamber went silent. On the display, new alerts appeared. More species withdrawing, more governments issuing statements, more questions. 4 species initially, now 6, then 12, then 17. Each withdrawal visible to everyone, each one making the next easier. Each one demonstrating that the Council's unified front was an illusion. And Varathas, standing at the viewport, watched it happen. Watched the system he had served for his entire career fracture in real time. Watched 47 council officers step forward publicly, adding their voices over Kerneth's. Watched the truth finally matter. His scales shifted one final time. Not gray, not blue, something lighter. The color his species displayed when a burden lifted. Wren did not look at the display. He kept his eyes on the representatives. Gentlemen, he said quietly, the terms. They signed 87 minutes later. Not because they wanted to, because the alternative was watching their entire structure collapse while they argued. The signature went on the physical document. Old-fashioned, symbolic, witnessed by Earth's delegation, by Kerneth, by the 47 network members watching via encrypted channel, legally binding under council law. When it was done, when the representatives had left, Hartwell stood at the viewport beside Varathas. What will you do with the remaining ships? Varathas asked. That's an interesting question. We could destroy them. They're helpless. We could activate the grid and finish it. But you will not. No, us. Why not? Hartwell thought about Sarah. 20 years of grief channeled into purpose. Because we win wars. We don't commit genocide. There's a difference. If we lose sight of that, we become what we fought against. He turned to Varathas. Your ships have safe passage, all of them. They can return to council space. No one will stop them. Varathas's scales shifted, the dark color fading. That is unexpected. Is it, we sent 5,000 ships home in pieces, but the ones that surrendered we send home alive. That's the lesson. Earth can be ruthless in defense. But we're not monsters. And what about me? Varathas asked. His voice held something fragile. I led this fleet. I gave the orders. I bear responsibility. What do you want to do? The question seemed to surprise him. I do not wish to return. The broadcast has made my position untenable. And the things I have learned, he trailed off. If Earth has use for someone with complete knowledge of council tactical systems, I am available. Varathas paused, then added quieter, I would like to spend what remains of my career serving something worth serving. Hartwell thought about it for 4 seconds. We do. Welcome to Earth Defense Command. Varathas's scales shifted to something that almost looked like relief. Thank you, Admiral. 3 months later, Senator Wren stood in the newly established tribunal chambers on a station that once belonged to the Council. Now it belonged to everyone. 52 former client states had sent representatives. 23 council member species sent observers. And arriving slowly carefully after 800 years of silence were representatives from the forgotten worlds. Wren watched them enter. Humans, undeniably human, but dressed in clothes from a culture that had developed in isolation, speaking a dialect of English that sounded like music. They saw him. stopped. One of them, an older woman with gray hair, started crying. "You came," she said. "We thought Earth had died or forgotten us." "We survived," Ren said gently, "and we never stopped being your family. We just didn't know where you were." The reunion would take months. Cultural exchange, technology sharing, healing 800 years of separation. But it had begun. In the command center on Earth, Hartwell stood with Vaughn at the observation deck. The shield wall grid was still running, still monitoring, still ready. "They're asking if we can power it down," Vaughn said. "Several council species say it's a symbol of aggression. What do you think?" "I think it's a symbol of preparation, of what happens when you give a species 40 years and a reason to survive. I think it stays up." "Agreed." They stood in comfortable silence. Hartwell's hand found hers. She squeezed back. 20 years of friendship, of working side by side, of something neither had been willing to acknowledge until now. "What happens now?" Vaughn asked. "We help the ones who were hurt. We make sure this never happens again. We build something better." "And us," Hartwell turned to face her, really looked at her, saw what had always been there. "We figure that out too. We have time now." Vaughn smiled. For the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. "Yes, we do." On the display behind them, the shield wall grid glowed steady. Thousands of nodes, 40 years of construction, it would keep running. Not because another fleet was expected, because the galaxy had learned what Earth was capable of when given time and purpose and absolute determination. Some lessons were worth keeping visible. Across council space, beings watched the tribunal begin its work, watched evidence emerge, watched 63 civilizations finally get their truth spoken, watched 47 council officers step forward and say, "We knew, we remember, and we are finished keeping silent." The council restructured, reformed, or collapsed. Either way, the universe was changing. And in a small apartment on one of the forgotten worlds, a child looked up at the sky and asked her mother if it was true, if Earth had really survived, if there were really humans among the stars who had won against the people who controlled them for 800 years. "Yes," her mother said, "and they came for us. They never forgot." The child thought about that. "Are we safe now?" "I think so. I think we're finally safe." On Earth, in the operations center beneath the Colorado Rockies, Lieutenant Frost stood at the tactical table where she had watched 5,000 ships arrive, where she had called out the numbers as they died, where she had whispered to her father that they had won. She looked at the shield wall display, still running, still ready, and she allowed herself something she had not permitted in 20 years. Hope. Hartwell stood at the same table. Long-range sensors were picking up anomalous readings in outer territories, regions that had not received the broadcast, civilizations that did not know what happened here. "Then we'll have to tell them," Hartwell said. "Send diplomatic vessels, share the files, let them know what we learned." "And if they need help?" Frost asked. Hartwell thought about the forgotten worlds, about 63 civilizations, about Cairneth and his 47 colleagues who had waited so long. "Then they'll have it. Earth knows what it's like to stand alone. We're not going to let anyone else face that if we can help it." He looked at the shield wall display one more time. Still running, still ready. But now it was not just Earth's defense. It was a promise, a demonstration, proof that preparation and unity and absolute refusal to surrender could overcome forces that seemed unstoppable. The universe was large. Much of it had not yet received the broadcast. Earth would be ready when it did, but this time Earth would not be alone.